What is going on, everyone? Welcome into this week's edition of the Mast Podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I'm the Territory Sales Manager for the state of Kentucky, Indianapolis to Southern Indiana and Southern Ohio. Joining me today is Scott Wheeler, President of Pools Plus. Scott, how's it going, sir? How are you?
Great. How are you?
Doing just fine. Trying to navigate this cold weather. The Louisville area, admittedly, doesn't really do well with cold weather, but we're working to get through it. Um, Appreciate everyone for tuning in this week. Scott, do me a favor, kind of give me a little bit of a background into Pools Plus. I know when you took over, you were able to expand at Pools Plus based out of Michigan. Just give me a little bit of a backstory into the company that you're with.
We are actually on our 60th year. This year is our 60th year in business. It started
Congratulations.
thank you, started under a gentleman named Bert Hoekstra. He just worked it out of his garage and was back when the, NSPI was an actual thing. So they were big members in that. They grew the company out of their garage into a location. I started working for them in the 80s while getting a degree to teach high school history. And by the time I got my degree, I was like, I'm having more fun doing this and making more money. So I'm like, I don't think I'll teach. So I stuck it out. And then when he retired and divorced, my ex-wife and I bought the company.
That's kind of the same thing with me. Got my degree in communications, was completely set on becoming a sports broadcaster, and then for me, COVID happened and kind of threw a wrench in the plans. But with Scott on the episode, I want to bring him on to answer questions and give some advice about expansion. It seems like we're starting to see companies um, be able to grow more and more, maybe not even with what they're doing, but just adding more stores. We're starting to see companies try to compete with the big box chains. You have to compete with Amazon and other companies somehow, right? So I feel like Scott is a great source to be able to draw some insight from that. So hopefully you're able to draw some inspiration from this episode. As we mentioned, a rising tide raises all ships. Scott, I'm curious, when you took over, headquarters based out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. You have two stores. I guess first I'll start out. Was it always in your mind that you were going to expand, or was that something that when you got into the saddle that you're like, you know what, this could probably happen?
No, I would say it was like right off the bat. I think a lot of entrepreneurs think, at least I do, that I could take the idea, the good parts of Pools Plus, get
Hmm.
rid of some of the bad stuff and add to it. And part of that was growth. Like he was generating, and I was his GM. We were milling, churning cash, right? So we were doing a lot of money, but we weren't making a lot of profit. I mean, he had his
Sure.
hands in. We were doing pool tables and billiards and saunas, and we were doing a lot of stuff and
Hmm.
making a lot of money, but we weren't making any profit. So one of the first things I did is I chopped our offerings down and went to the core offerings that we were profitable on and that we were good at. Right, we couldn't compete with the Watsons of the world on pool tables and that sort of thing. So there's no point in us playing it. We're doing $1 million, but we're losing money doing it. What's the point, right? So
Hmm.
we got rid of that stuff, and then we just started by focusing. We just looked at the map and we just began to grow our territory. You know what I mean? Like where I want to go. I want to open a couple more before I retire, and they're already picked out where I want to go. I had a chunk on the map where I'm not bugging Detroit, I'm not bugging Lansing. I got the Lake Shore in Grand Rapids, and it's a good chunk of West Michigan. But if you have a footprint in those locations, it helps you to sell the in-ground pools. Some of the stores are bigger, obviously. Some of the smaller satellite stores, the two of them are more satellite-y. They funnel to the bigger stores by having a footprint there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a pretty interesting thing to say because when you think of expansion, I feel like instinctively you're thinking about, well, taking your store that you currently have and just replicating it. And we so often maybe brush over the idea of satellite stores. And I'm interested to hear about, and I know that it's another stream of revenue, obviously, but being able to get into maybe a market that you weren't able to in the first place, satellite stores could be very useful. And it doesn't seem like, there's as much upkeep as it would be with your normal traditional retail front.
Exactly, you hit the nail on the head. So when we wanted to expand, there's a lot of pools being built in Jenison, so we put a small store there. You know what I mean? It's not teeny; it's 2,500 square feet, but it's a cheaper rent. Can be run by one person year round. Then we can capture those chemical sales and the referrals. That store has 3 hot tubs on display. The other satellite store in Greenville is a little bigger and it has like 6. Doesn't have the full line, but we're able to show the lines, break even and make a small profit, but the entire company grows from it. So you can get those to a break even point in 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that. And I'm interested for those listening and they're looking to expand what they're doing and they might have the same idea. And I see sometimes in Louisville there are some people that have some ideas kind of going into the pocket between Louisville and Lexington. If there are people that are listening to this, Scott, and they're saying, you know what, there's a little area that's a little bit further away that we could be able to immerse ourselves into that area and be that go-to pool place, what are some things that you need to keep in mind there? Is there like, well, we need to make sure that we have ABC? What are some of the main priorities that, in your experience, you need to make sure you have your ducks in a row on?
That's a great question. So we shoot for around 2,500 square feet. We don't want to be off the beaten path, but not directly on the beaten path. We try to, we're a summer-based business, right? So we need the rent to be reasonable.
Hmm.
And because of the type of products that our industry sells, it can't all be on display. So a lot of it becomes a warehouse. So you don't want to have to be paying all this great frontage, fee for when half of it's just going to be boxes in the back. You know what I mean? Liquid chlorine, whatever you're selling, right? So that's the
Hmm.
first. You need people. So that's the other thing is, a challenge that we have found as we've grown is finding somebody to run those individual locations that you trust, right? Like I'm there once a week. I have a great operations manager who, we're there. We do weekly Zoom meetings and training meetings for the staff. So those staffs have to all come into a central location and I train them in person. But that's like once a week, right? So you need people that can take that once a week, team mentality and project your vision forward. So that can be a bit of a challenge when you're only there X amount of time because I can't be at every location all the time and do everything else that I have to do. So
Right.
I don't know if that answered your question or if I.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely did. It kind of brings me to a point to where I wasn't originally thinking about this, but I kind of am interested in your thought. You talked about the location of a store and needing, it to make sense from a rent standpoint, but also needing to be in a spot to where it makes sense to where it's presentable. And I'm interested in, let's say you had to have a hypothetical to where you could choose one or the other. You could choose being right in the middle of things, but not having maybe a reasonable rent or as much warehouse space, or you could be in a not ideal location but have those two things. Which one would you personally go with and why?
I would probably go with the rent because just having done this, I've opened. I'm not going to sit here and lie and
Sure.
say everything I've ever opened has worked. Right? I've picked
You
locations.
live and you learn. I mean, it's
We were
it's
in
it's
Holland,
growing.
between a city. There's another city called Grand Haven, and I thought, well, if I went right in the middle, I could capture both. Pool stores are destination. I'll put the money in advertising, and I went bigger store, and I wasn't pulling enough from either market to actually get it. So, I bit off more than I could chew there, and I realized there were
Sure.
more pools, more money opportunity in Holland. I went smaller, found a location with a rent that I could afford, and then typically what I'll do is I'll open a strip mall, and then eventually I will turn it into like in Holland. I moved and then bought a building so that builds up the value of the company, right? You have some real estate and you're doing this with the cash kind of thing. But as you grow, it makes it easier for me to approach real estate
Hmm.
agents and go, all right, I'm going to do a 2-year lease or a 5-year lease, depending on the
Yeah.
neighborhood. See if if I'm in the right spot, but maybe the town's right, but the street's wrong. You got to be
Yeah.
willing to move and to hit that right spot. And we've done that in Jenison. We had to move 3 times to find the right location. In Holland, we had to move just the once, but it varies by location till you find that right mix of space, rent. But to answer your question, I'm being long-winded. The right thing I would do is I always chase the cash. So if I can get it breaking even and turning a profit, then I can begin to focus on the next one.
That's fair for sure. And I think, like you said, it seems like we just have to be honest with ourselves. Trial and error is a real thing. I mean, not everyone nails their first idea. I mean, especially if you're going into a new area that you're not completely familiar with. Like you may have a grasp on it, but maybe you get into that area and it's like, oh, this really wasn't what I expected, and then you have to adjust. And I think that that's where you have to have that honesty, being able to look in the mirror and say, you know what, this isn't working, but here's another idea that I have that might be able to adjust things and get things to where you need to be, especially with sometimes like a satellite store. Um, with the expansion of stores, how do you make it to where there's not a huge amount of increased headache? I mean, obviously your umbrella gets larger with what you're dealing with, and I think that that's the major question with those that are wanting to expand is like, yeah, the money looks great on the paper, but what are the headaches that I'm going to take on, and how do I sort of navigate those to where it's not driving me crazy and taking my joy away from this?
That's a great question. There's a mantra I repeat, and I tell this to my staff in our management meetings, and it's not what you make, it's what you keep. And
Hmm.
it's the small business people. If we don't realize that, we're gonna fail, right? It's what you keep at the end of the day, right? So, and you have to like it. Like it is stressful. I'll probably die young. I mean, I have a bourbon collection behind me. But I love what I do. I get up and I build backyard dreams for people. I sell them a hot tub. I become part of their family life. I just got a great email from a lady I built a pool for, where she's like, I consider you a friend now, not my pool guy. And that's the highest compliment that I can get. And yeah, it's stressful. It is stressful, but you got to get good people. If you build a good team, and you got to find the right way to compensate them, right? So some of them it's money. Some people it's a title. Some people it's giving them power to change their store and what their offerings are, how they would structure things, and you
Hmm.
have to find those buttons that make a good person tick, and then you build your team around those ticks. You know what I mean? So we've got some real spreadsheety guys, and I'm okay with them. You know what I mean? And we all work together as a team. Like they know, my team knows everything. They know how much money I have in the bank. So if they're like, well, why don't we go get a new fleet of service trucks? Well, here's what we got. Is that where you want me to spend the money? Do you want it to go on advertising? I don't believe in the style of ownership where I know everything and I just pay these people to work for me, show up. Why am I paying you if I don't want some of your input? I assume
Yeah.
I hired you for your brain, so here's the
Well, you
actual
have to make
picture.
people
Help me
feel
out.
appreciated. I mean,
Yeah.
that's another thing is you're investing in your employees. And look, the pool industry is one of those that is susceptible to employee turnover. I mean, it's a seasonal business in nature. I mean, people are trying to circumnavigate that and find ways to employ full-time employees year round. And for those that do that, I salute you. And it's not an easy task to do. And I think that the employees definitely appreciate it. I always get a kick out of hearing unique employee appreciation tactics. And Scott, it's my understanding that obviously COVID kind of messed some things up, but you used to do a yearly canoe trip. Kind of walk me through that a little bit.
Well, what we would do is, again, because you see these people on meetings, right? But
Yeah.
you want the teams in Holland and Jenison and Greenville to become a team. So a team building
Yeah.
thing we would do is we'd go to a little town called Newego, and the entire team would show up. They could bring their spouses. Company rented stuff, provided food, and we would just canoe all day. You could literally paddle ahead because they drop you off and you end at your car. So there was no, it's not a work requirement. If somebody didn't want to make it or they're scared of water, I'm not gonna make them go, right? But we would go float down that river, and just having that interaction of being on the river, having a day off. We actually shut the company down on a summer day, which is kind of unheard of on a summer Saturday, and we're floating on the river having fun. And I think the team appreciated that. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
we're giving up
Hmm.
a lot of money, but we're building a team, and the payoff was more than worth it. And it was fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's just finding unique ways. I mean, look, everyone, it goes without saying, it makes me feel silly for saying this, but everyone's paying their employees, obviously. But it's finding those different ways to make them feel special, which I think is pretty awesome, and especially with multiple stores to where maybe they don't see you personally every day, or they don't talk to you every single day, and maybe they're not a part of the headquarters, but being able to include those satellite stores, those secondary locations, I think that's pretty much a necessity. Scott, every week on this show, we like to incorporate a mailbag question. And the mailbag question for the show today is, what is the biggest issue slash point of neglect for those that are looking to create a second location or looking to expand? Better asked, what's the biggest mistake people make?
I don't want to be one of those guys who repeats himself, but if everybody and every small business person just woke up every day and it said to themselves, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. If just opening a location to say, all right, I added another 500,000 to my top line, but if you're losing 100 grand out of that location, and I'm not talking your first year, right? That's you expect to lose money when you're starting out. You got upfront costs and so forth, but if you're
Sure.
not approaching every day with it's not what you make, it's what you keep, and then that's the money that I can invest in my team and my locations and on my company, and the whole team understands that if you can get them all to buy into that. So if they want to sell a new product, they want us to expand into something, that's great. Well, then how are we going to sell these, how are we going to position them? And we're not going to just churn cash by chill tubs are a new thing, right? We're running
Right.
into, I'm sure like a lot of your listeners are big on chill tubs, and we're moving them, but we're not moving them for the numbers that I'm comfortable giving up floor space forever on. And I know it's a newer product, but it's one of those things where do you carry? And I'm just picking on one product, one category, and maybe it's doing better in other cities. But if we have 5 locations and we're not moving enough profitably, just because we're moving a lot of chill tubs, if they're not moving enough profitably, then why are we carrying them? If that,
Yeah. No,
long
I
way to
think
answer your
that
question.
yeah, no, that's definitely a great way to look at it. I do wonder with big box stores and online shopping. I mean, being in retail, and I've mentioned this a million times to the point to where listeners are probably getting tired of it, but it's the truth. In 2025, retail has never been more challenging because we're facing different beasts that I mean, look, I started in retail when I was a sophomore in high school in 2014, working summers for my family business. The challenges in 2014 versus the challenges in 2024 were completely different. And
Yeah.
it all spans upon, big box and online with multiple stores. I'm curious, Scott, how have you been able to, as a company, sort of combat those? What are some things that now obviously you bring the expertise to the equation, but is there anything that you're doing uniquely that you feel like is giving you a competitive advantage over big box slash online shopping?
I'd love to tell you it's something super unique, Dalton. It's it's. I'm laughing because it's so basic, and we all just have to remember it. A customer can choose to go buy something from Amazon or from Home Depot or from me, right? If we're not giving them that customer service, that loving touch when they're in there and they have to come back to us and want to come back to us, then they're not
Yeah.
going to, right? And we got Meijer around us. I don't know if you know Meijer. They're like a grocery store, like a Target with food, and
Yeah.
so we're competing with a lot of people on everything I carry as major competitor close by. And I think what separates us is the service. So do we drop the ball? We're not perfect. I'm never going to pretend to be perfect, but we try to learn from it and grow. And we really do strive to bring you into the Pools Plus family. And then our referrals are our biggest part of that's how we sell the most pools we sell. Our hot tubs. I mean, people, when they buy from us, we white glove them, and then they recommend us. So I would say that it's focus on your customer, and that's the only way we're going to beat these guys. We're never going to totally beat them, but there's always going to be
Yeah.
where I want the loving touch versus buying into a big box and pointing at it and saying, load that in my pickup, in that hot tub or that bucket of this or that, right? So
Mhm.
that's it. I mean, I wish there was some building is
There's no
very
there's no
stressful.
magic formula,
No, there
right?
is no magic, right? So you're building a pool and you're in their backyard for a week, and a lot of people just walk away, and I can't believe they walk away. These people are my gold mine. I mean,
Yeah.
they have my cell number, and we just stay in touch. We the pool's in the ground, but I want to hear what's going on in their lives, and it is paid
Mhm.
off. So
Here's my take on this, and I know that my opinion isn't shared by some. I hope it's shared by a good amount. Is that I think that you the you sometimes you see obstacles come and go, and they're very temporary. But I think that everyone understands that what we're going through with online and Amazon, it's not going away. It's getting worse, and it's going
yeah,
to continue to get worse. But as much as that is the case, Scott, I feel like this industry, it's still old school in the way that it's still word of mouth. Word of mouth is huge. I mean, how many times do you build a pool in one neighborhood and you have three or four prospective clients also in that same neighborhood? And as much as this world will continue to get more technology based, I feel like retail will still have a competitive opportunity, but you have to be able to find your lane and find your niche. And that looks different for everyone. And that's the thing about this show. Just because, like, there's more than one way to get to the right answer. 6 plus 3 equals 9, but so does 5 plus 4 and 7 plus 2. So I think that what people need to be focused on instead of, well, we're just at a disadvantage, we can't compete. Well, find a way.
mm-hmm.
Find a way to find what they can't do. And I'm not sure well, I guess the day that people start getting hired away to work for Amazon's pool division online, then we might be having a different conversation. But you see what I'm saying, don't you?
Yeah, I hope that doesn't happen, but. Yeah, you hit the something there. Like there used to be when I started. I'm doing this longer than you because I'm ancient, but there everybody did
You're
free
only
water.
29, Scott.
Where do I send that check? Because you're getting a check for that one. No, so like everybody did free water samples. Well, now people are charging for it because they're expensive. They have the computer readers,
Sure.
the discs. We still do it old school with the lab, and I'm not going to charge customers to do it. And it spreads, like that word spreads, and if I can get them back in this, and yes, it's a loss leader. Just like grocery stores sell certain things at a loss, you have to sell certain things at a loss. And but they're walking by the hot tubs, they're getting our input. And then when we're talking about, I'm a BioGuard dealer, so if we're talking about a $40 bucket more chlorine, why it's different than what they're getting online or at a big box store, I have a chance to tell them. And when they're having trouble, yeah, I have a lost leader, but ultimately at the end of the day, if I wake up with that amount, or it's what I keep, if I'm keeping enough and I can pay my staff, and I can keep my heartburn down to a manageable level, then I consider it a success.
No, I definitely understand that. Scott Wheeler, president of Pulse Plus up in the cold state of Michigan. I say that like Louisville just hasn't gotten a foot of snow recently, which feels like it shut the city down, but it seems like that might be light work for you all. But I hope that you all found some inspiration in this show. If you all took one piece of information away, then I feel like this show has been successful. Be sure to like this video, subscribe on whatever platform you utilize. We'll be back next week. Until then, you're listening to the Mast Podcast. Don't forget, a rising tide raises all ships. We'll see you soon.